So I am happy to have Dr. Ken Randall here with us today out of the College of Allied Health. So he's in Department of Rehabilitation Sciences, more specifically. Great expert when it comes to all things physical therapy. So perfect for this. If you haven't ever had a chance to interact with Dr. Randall or hear him talk or anything, you're in for a treat. He's great, very knowledgeable, and really fun to be around as well. So he's here to talk to us about Zoom neck and other potential at-desk problems. Man, I'm sure many of us are feeling the effects of a lot of Zooms, a lot of sitting. So great to hear what Dr. Randall has to share with us and try to help combat some of those issues that probably many of us are running into on a daily basis. So thank you all very much, and thank you, Dr. Randall.
Lindsay, thank you very much for that very nice introduction and also for the invitation. So I hope that everybody has had a good day so far and that it wasn't involved with back-to-back Zoom meetings. If it is, let's see what we can do to maybe give you a few strategies to help to address those. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, but definitely feel free to just unmute and ask your question if you have it as well. So I definitely want to thank not only the OU Wellness Week organizers, but also the folks who are a part of the Exercises Medicine initiative on the different campuses. And I am very happy and proud to be a part of that group. And if I've missed anybody, I apologize, but one of my mentors once said, hang out with really smart people, and this is definitely the case here. So thank you all. So as you all know, I mean, 2020, I think for all of us was quite an unexpected event, not only in our lives, but in our generation. And these are two quotes that kind of really resonated with me. And you know, I look at 2020 as being a big reset in a lot of different ways. And the point where we had to stay at home, and some of us are still at home, some are making the transition back to work, and then some are sort of back and forth between the two different settings. But the whole idea of thinking about this reset and maybe even evaluating some of our habits. And you know, habits are really things that we don't necessarily think a lot about. We just do them. And so 2020, I think, gave a lot of us this opportunity to reflect on what is normal and whether we want to get back completely to the normal that was pre-pandemic. So when we were working at home, I have to say that, you know, that was a huge change. And the lower three slides are right up my alley, because these are people who are trying to figure out a way to create a workstation at home. And I have to tell you that this image right here, I would say that it is not hoarding if you use your large bales of toilet paper as an ergonomic aid. So kudos to them. Necessity is certainly the mother of invention, and some of these workstations maybe were a little bit more helpful than others. And then as we start to transition back to our office desks, whether they're sitting desks, standing desks, or we move back and forth between the two, you know, one of the things I really want you to think about is this habit of how we're aligned, our posture, if you will. And even though many of you are not sharing your video, I'm hoping that when I just used the word posture, that some of you reflexively sat up a little bit taller. If you have a standing desk, good for you. We'll talk about that. You know, many of us have dual screens. And so like right now, my slideshow is right in front of me, which is where I want it to be to keep my head from rotating. But you'll see me turn every now and then just to kind of check the chat. And so thinking about just how we're set up, how our environment is organized is going to be something that is really going to be very helpful. So when we think of posture, most of us don't have what we might consider ideal posture, which is when our head is really balanced over the rest of our body. We spend a lot of our time looking down or sitting on our tailbones. Lots of different reasons why we do this. But the typical posture that most people demonstrate to one extent or another is this head forward posture, where our chin is ahead of the rest of our body. Our shoulders are kind of rounded in, and we're usually slumped or hunched. And if you do that for any length of time, where your head is in positions like this, the upper trapezius muscle, which if you haven't learned that from just where you've been in your life up to this point, I'm going to introduce you to that key piece of anatomy, because those muscles, the upper trapezius on the right and left side, if our head is forward a lot, those muscles have to work to hold your head up. And if you do that for any length of time, many of us will develop these aches and pains, particularly in these little trigger point areas here. And then some folks might actually get a tension headache that begins at the base of their skull and works their way forward. And so if that is something you have experienced, then you probably have experienced Zoom neck or Zoom shoulder, or whatever you want to call it. So the human head weighs about 12 to 14 pounds. And in good alignment, if you're sitting in really good alignment, your head is balanced so that those upper trapezius muscles don't have to work. They're not postural control muscles. And you know what's amazing about how our bodies are designed is that we're so energy efficient that if we are in good posture or good alignment, our muscles don't have to work much at all. Now, there are some that are working, but not many. So again, the upper trapezius muscle, if you're having pain, it's going to produce this discomfort that may feel like it's in your neck. It may feel like it's in the top of your shoulder. And because the muscle spans both those areas, very common for that. So the thing that I really want to do in this 20-minute conversation, we'll have about 10 minutes left to answer some questions that you might have. First and foremost, I just want you to think about your posture and your alignment, particularly when you get into the busyness of your day. And I hope to give you some very straightforward strategies to address that, whether it's being on Zoom meetings back to back, or just being at your desk at your computer. And again, whether you're sitting or standing, and maybe you're even able to kind of work between those two, which is great. And then as a physical therapist, I am going to shamelessly and unapologetically put a plug in for exercise and movement. And we'll talk about how maybe physical activity can become a habit and a part of your new normal if it's not already. So posture is alignment of our body segments. And when we have good alignment, we have not a lot of muscle activity. And when those muscles don't have to act all the time, they're pretty happy. So if you think about the external auditory meatus, the hole where sound comes into our ears, whether you're sitting or standing, but since you're sitting right now, I want you to just think about that ear hole being positioned right over the middle of the tip of your shoulder. So if you were to look at your shoulder from front and back, right here. And when you do that, you probably find that you have to extend your upper back a little bit to get into that position. But I'm going to challenge you to see if you can't balance the external auditory meatus not only over the tips of your shoulders, but if you move from side to side in your chair, you're going to feel those little sit bones, the ischial tuberosities. So think about those ear holes being balanced right over those sit bones. And that probably has already placed you in a really good sitting posture. Now, to translate this to standing, if you will just think about balancing those ear holes over your tips of your shoulders, and then right about where your ankles are, those bony prominences on each side, then you will be in really good alignment in standing as well. So I've already started to give you some cues here for optimal sitting. When you're sitting in a chair, in addition to keeping the ear holes balanced over those sit bones, I also want you to think about your thighs being parallel with the floor if you can. And hopefully if you have an adjustable chair, you can help to raise it or lower it to get to that point. You'll want your feet to be flat on the floor if possible. And if you have legs that don't quite reach the floor, you might think about getting a small footstool to give you that support under your feet. And then I want you to think about how your right hip, your right knee, and your right ankle are all in the same vertical plane. So they're not splaying out or they're not splaying in. And then if you can, just put a very small arch in your lower back. And a lot of times your chairs will give you that small support. But if not, you can easily make a lumbar roll here with just a small towel or a small pillow. And if you can feel on your back where, well, basically where your belt line is, but the top of your hip bones, that would be where you put that small lumbar support. And I have to tell you that I do practice what I preach. I have my own lumbar support right here. So optimal sitting posture, optimal standing posture. And when you do that, your muscles do not have to work very much at all. So let's talk about this idea of posture becoming a habit and maybe replacing some of your old postural habits with better alignment. So a habit is something that we do so much that it's subconscious. We don't even think about it anymore. Think about your drive to work is probably so automatic that sometimes you get to work and you're like, how did I even get here? I don't even remember getting here. And it's usually when something out of the ordinary happens that you kind of snap back into paying attention to where you're driving. Our environments shape our posture, and our activities shape our posture as well. And probably one of the best examples is sitting on an airline seat, which just can't give you good posture because it creates a C curve in your lower back. For those of you who are going to be traveling anytime in the near future or for the rest of your life, putting a little lumbar roll right back there is going to help to line things up. But we get good at what we do, whether it's a good or a bad thing. And if you're a championship cyclist, sometimes your body will adjust in some pretty amazing ways to get you being good at what you do. So habits and musculoskeletal pain can go hand in hand. And there's really a number of mechanisms here, but the two that I want you to think about, the first is the one we're going to talk about a lot this afternoon, which is sustained postures, being in the same position for a length of time. But repeated movements can also lead to those musculoskeletal problems as well. But I just want you to think about how you habitually hold yourself, how you're sitting right now. Are you sitting with your weight more on one hip than another? Are you sitting where your sit bones are scooted forward in the chair and you're kind of sitting on your tailbone? When you stand and you're talking, are you leaning on one side? Do you cross your legs? Just think about all those different things that you do without even thinking about it. And then think about those activities that you do, and particularly those that when you've done them long enough and you're like, man, I'm hurting after this. So sustained postures, there's a lot of them out there. And anything that takes any amount of time that you're in that position, sleep positions, most of us sleep between 6 and 8 hours a night. That is a sustained posture. So if you're sleeping in an awkward position, you might wake up with some musculoskeletal pain. Sitting at the desk is a big aspect of a lot of chronic musculoskeletal problems. And I really want to point out something that one of my mentors, Shirley Sarman from Washington University, said. She said, we get away with poor posture and poor habits of movement, just like we might get away with poor diet, poor nutrition, or heaven forbid that you might smoke. It takes a while for those things to catch up with you. So when we're thinking about how we're sitting or moving, we do what is familiar, but it may not necessarily be the best way or the least injurious way to do something. So when you're sitting at your desk, I just want you to think about these basics here, whether it's at home or whether it is in your office. And the first thing that I would say is your monitor should be about arm's reach away from you. The top of the monitor should be about 2 to 3 inches above your eye level. So if you're looking straight ahead, you're looking about 2 to 3 inches below the top of your screen. And if you do have dual monitors, or if you're working off of a document, really try to look as straight ahead as much as you can. So if you do have a second monitor, I would say, turn your head to look at it, but try to avoid sustained positions of rotation. Hopefully you can have your elbows supported, and the best position at a desk is one where your elbows are pretty much level with your desk surface, so that when your hand is on the mouse or on the keyboard, your elbow and your wrist are really in the same parallel plane with the floor. And you certainly want to try to keep your wrists in neutral. Any kind of flexion or extension or any pressure on your carpal tunnel can produce some real problems. And again, I've already mentioned that lumbar support. And the other thing that I want to point out on this slide is the idea of moving, whether it's small movement or whatever, but every 20 minutes or so, just do some kind of a movement that takes your body out of this sustained posture. If you can get up and move around, that's awesome. But definitely try to work away from just holding yourself in these work positions for a long period of time. If you are fortunate enough to have a standing desk, think about the postural alignment in standing that we already talked about, where your ear holes are balanced over your shoulders and those are balanced over your ankle joints. So with that, think about being equal weight bearing between both right and left side. And if you can, you really want to have your elbows supported on that standing desk if that is an option. And it should be at a height where your forearms and your hands, which are on the keyboard, are parallel with the floor. Okay, so things to think about if you have that standing, the standing desk. And the beauty of standing desks is that usually you can transition from sitting to standing and back again. So just mixing that up will be very helpful for you. The first thing about changing a habit is just being aware that it exists. And whenever I talk about posture, especially if I'm in the clinic working with patients, the first thing that usually happens is you get this military, chest up and chest forward. And so the first thing that I would say is when you make these postural adjustments, do it in a relaxed way. Don't over exaggerate what you're doing. And again, take those frequent breaks. I think a lot of us are probably guilty of let me just plow through this and get this done, and then I'll get up and move. And that can certainly, that mentality can lead to some musculoskeletal problems. And then this idea of let's do some movement, maybe exercises that can move you or exercise you out of those sustained postures. The research that has been done on changing habits or replacing old habits with new habits, the range is pretty long on how long it might take an individual to successfully incorporate a new habit, but on average, it takes about 2 months. So in replacing an old habit with a new one, 2 months. But the more you do it and the more you get toward past the initiation of the habit, the easier it becomes. So I want you to think of this habit of a new optimal posture, whether it's sitting or standing. So just checking into what that good alignment is. A cue that I give a lot of the people that I work with about posture is to say, bring your heart or your breastbone to the ceiling. When you do that, you automatically extend your thoracic spine. Level your chin, and then don't squeeze your shoulder blades together, but just bring them gently toward each other. And when you do that, that puts you in a really good alignment. I would anticipate that many of you have probably done yoga in the past, or you may do it right now. There are a couple of yoga postures that are perfect to counteract all the sitting and even the prolonged standing that we do throughout our day. So every 20 minutes, think about taking a micro break, checking in with your alignment and your posture. The more you get into something, sometimes the more you start to get that head forward posture. And the more we're concentrating, a lot of times we start to develop a very shallow breathing pattern. So when you check in every 20 minutes with your alignment, just take a nice, deep, cleansing breath. Maybe even hold it for a second, and then just breathe out. And it's amazing how much tension we can store, particularly in our shoulders and our necks, when we're in those sustained postures. So every 20 minutes, think about getting up and moving. And if you think about this, even in optimal sitting, if we do this, 8 hours a day, hopefully breaking it up with movement in amongst that time frame. But the reason why I love this, those of you who know yoga know this as the upward facing dog posture. And if you think about it, this posture almost completely counteracts this posture here. We have flexed hips, we have flexed knees, and this extends the hips and it gets the knees extended. It also really helps to elongate your abdominal muscles as well, particularly if you're sitting in a slouch position. And then the opposite of the upward facing dog is the downward facing dog. And that stretches your hamstring muscles and your low back muscles very nicely. And then there's some Pilates exercises, some yoga exercises that you can do to really help to strengthen your core, to gain flexibility and gain strength. Because when your musculoskeletal system has strength with length in it, and when you move it regularly, it's going to serve you very well, and it's probably going to be less prone for pain. So my shameless plug for physical activity, what the research tells us is that if we do 150 minutes of moderate physical activity a week, so that's just 30 minutes, 5 days a week, we will be able to maintain our physical capacity, our strength of our heart, our cardiovascular endurance. When we go a little bit beyond that, we actually can make gains in our physical fitness and our strength. So the converse of physical activity is being sedentary or insufficiently active, and sitting is probably the biggest source. That there's only really a couple of authors who are willing to say how much sitting is not good for us. Most of them say move more, sit less, which that's not a bad rule of thumb. But 8 hours a day, if we can sit for no more than 8 hours a day, which that is a lot anyway, it's going to be better for us. So again, this idea of breaking up your prolonged sitting with movement and not falling into that mindset of let's just get her done. So if you are experiencing problems with your upper trap, if you have Zoom neck, let me give you a couple of thoughts here on some things to do to take care of this. To stretch your upper trapezius, take your right arm and just sit on your right hand. That's going to stabilize your arm. And then side bend away from your right side. So you're going to side bend to the left. Put your other hand, you're not going to crank on your head, but just let the weight of your left arm pull your right head over a little bit, and then turn your chin towards the right. And you're going to feel how rotating that chin towards the right really helps you to isolate the upper trap. Take a nice deep breath in, and as you breathe out, just slowly, don't crank, but just maybe put a little bit more pressure on that head to get a nice stretch on the upper trapezius. Hold that for maybe about 30 seconds. And that's going to be a great way that if you are developing Zoom neck to address it. And then another great exercise that you can do every 20 minutes, because it doesn't take much to do it, is just to roll your shoulders forward and backwards. And that in and of itself is going to be tremendous. Now, I just want to take a few minutes to also put a plug in for strengthening your core, which are not only your abdominal muscles, but the muscles of your back and even your gluteal muscles of your buttock. And there are an endless number of ways to strengthen your core. Some of these you're going, I'm not going to try that to save my life, which, yeah, it takes a while to get into a position like this. But the quadruped, lifting one leg and then one arm, or alternating one arm and one leg in a diagonal pattern, that's something that you can do that's really going to help to strengthen your core. The plank, or the upper part of a push-up position, one of the best ways to strengthen your abdominals and your back extensors. And I will say that we have a lot of abdominal muscles in our core. The transversus abdominis, this is a muscle that basically circles our waist between our pelvic bones and our ribs. And it is our natural girdle muscle. So if you're doing any kind of lifting, or you're in a prolonged standing or seated position, if you pull your navel into your spine without holding your breath, you're activating that transversus abdominis. And that is basically, this is the muscular equivalent. Actually, it's better than these braces because you're actually using a muscle to actively stabilize your lumbar spine. So you might be asking yourself, what kinds of seating options do I have? Well, you can spend a lot of money on really expensive chairs. Some folks like to use these stability balls. That is a great way to strengthen your core. Just keep in mind that whatever chair you're in, keep that little bit of an arch in your back, and keep those ear holes balanced over your shoulders, balanced over those sit bones, and life will be good. So yoga, I'm a fan of yoga. It's been around for thousands of years for a reason. Pilates, I love that as a great way to strengthen your core. And again, if we can do any form of exercise that gets your heart beating a little bit faster and gets you a little breathing a little bit more heavily, if we can do that 30 minutes 5 times a week, we're going to be in great stead. If you're trying to figure out how do I really strengthen my heart, how do I get good cardiovascular endurance, this simple formula up here of taking your age, subtracting that from 220 and then multiplying it by 70%, that gives you your training heart rate. That says if you can keep your heart at that level, you can strengthen it. And one of the best ways to strengthen your heart is through a brisk walk. You can do running, you can do dancing, anything that gets your heart beating faster and your lungs working a little bit more heavily is going to be good for your heart. And this is a plug for our Exercise is Medicine group, that they have created these great maps of the 3 different campuses that can help you with brisk walking in an environment that you're familiar with. And if you can do this with friends, people that you like, who can hold you accountable, so much the better. There's no reason why exercise and activity has to be boring. So in addition to this habit of posture and this habit of physical activity, I also want to express this idea of this habit of being gentle with yourself. You know, it's a lot of times what we say to others is so much more kind than what we say to ourselves. So the self-talk, encouraging yourself and saying, you can do this, really important. Getting enough sleep, and just thinking about how you move through your day and how you view your day. I just included some of the happiest days in my life, which there's too many to put on a slide. But teaching, I love teaching. I love hanging out with students. My goddaughter, one of the sweetest souls on earth. Best day of my life, one of them was when I was asked to be a Santa Claus for the Day Center for the Homeless, and it was awesome. I just can't tell you how fun that was. Going to Scotland, to Loch Ness, and Nessie might have even made an appearance in the background. Hanging out with my favorite dog, Nico, just things that feed your soul. I would say go for that. And the symptoms of happiness, this is how you know you've caught it, when you have all of these 12 and maybe even more symptoms. But the idea of not only being compassionate to others and kind of letting all the stresses of life just wash over you, is practicing that to yourself as well. And when we're happy, when we laugh, the research tells us that it is actually beneficial for our stress levels. Our stress hormone levels go down. It stimulates the immune system. And people who are happy, who laugh more often, they live longer. So the other thing is that laughter is excellent for that transversus abdominis muscle. So the more you laugh, the more you're working that muscle that gives you support to your low back. And if you've lost happiness, you can bounce back. Resilience is a person's ability to take whatever life has thrown at them and to work in directions that they overcome whatever problems they are. Resilience doesn't make the problems go away, but it helps you to look past them and to see a more optimistic future. So what is the key to happiness? Well, as Abraham Lincoln said, most people are about as happy as they set their minds to be. So choose to be happy. So as I wrap this up, we do what is familiar. We sit in positions that are habitual, but they may not necessarily be the best ones. So think about optimal alignment. Think about it being a relaxed process. Move every 20 minutes, even if it's small movements, even if it's stretching the upper trapezius or doing shoulder rolls. And think about that habit of 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise. Lots of different options out there. And be gentle, be kind to yourself in this process, and make happiness a habit. So I'm going to stop right there and see if anybody has any questions. I'm also going to look over here at the chat. So Kimberly says, have a standing desk I brought home from my computer's too heavy to lift on it. Do you have a recommendation on how to keep standing without it. So the computer desk won't handle the weight of the computer. Is that it? So what I would say is, you could use a countertop. I would say something that is bar height versus cabinet height might be something that would work well. But yeah, it looks like we might have to find a better standing desk for you if it can't withstand the weight of a computer. That's yeah, we need to get more ergonomic one for that. So yeah, the distances for those maps, I love that those things are mapped out for us. Sarkey's Energy, Norman campus. All right. Excellent. I love the chat there. Anybody have any questions that they would like to pose to the group as a whole? Or I know it's probably been the middle of a long day. I've held you for a little over 20 minutes, so hopefully that small stretch break might have done you some good. Lindsay, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about the exercises medicine groups that are on all 3 campuses, or what we have remaining for Wellness Week this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the great information, Dr. Randall. Good things that we may have, already be aware of, but good reminders, and then, some great information too, new information to consider and put into our habit. And I think that was great to remind us that definitely when we're starting something new, to give ourselves some time to create that new habit that, don't be hard on yourself if after a week it hasn't, it doesn't come into to be a habit, that it may take a couple months even. But yes, the Exercises Medicine on Campus group, fairly new group that we've started an initiative on all 3 campuses. So keep an eye out for more information to come. We're working on trying to put together a tri-campus events later on this summer, and then in the fall, just to get people moving. Really light stuff. As Dr. Randall shared, some walking maps that we're working on for each campus as well. So just a number of things, and just the important role that physical activity doesn't necessarily need to be exercise. Some people don't like that word, but physical activity, just finding ways to move that you really, really enjoy, is very important, and how to weave that into your day. And then, yes, we do have a few things left. I know it's Thursday afternoon, Wellness Week is almost over, but we do have a few more items. I know we do actually have a yoga via Zoom tomorrow for all campuses. There's also yoga tomorrow morning on the Tulsa campus. So that's an in-person one. So please, let's see here if I can pull up. Well, I can just put it here real quick. If you're not familiar yet with I have to talk to myself to make sure I type it correctly. But to the Wellness Week website, you can go ahead and visit there to see what additional events are still occurring the rest of this week. We've also recorded a lot of the virtual items, and we'll make sure and get those posted up, so and announce when those are available, so you can refer back to them if you weren't able to attend everything. So thank you guys so much. And please, yes, if you have any questions, just feel free to go ahead and let us know.
Happy Friday Eve. Keep moving and keep smiling, guys. We'll see you all soon.